Hello, and welcome to All the Grief, a regular podcast for all those who have been touched by grief. We are your hosts. I am Rebecca Luttrell.
And I am Andrea Mathern. We are two friends, a therapist, and a social scientist, both highly sensitive fellow grievers, here to share our hearts as we talk about all the grief.
Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Rebecca.
How is your heart this morning?
Oh, my heart this morning. I woke up, it's a little frazzled. I woke up and had to be on a panel for the other life, the life that is very far from grief, the life that is like my academic life, with which, over the past year for sure, I have been slowly moving away from this life that I built, and career and reputation and research. And I had a good time. I loved it. I loved thinking about it, and it was sweet and fun. And then I had a moment where I was like, do I want to do this every day? And do I want to work with organizations? And it was such a fucking hard nope. Do a panel every once in a while, pontificate, be a guest lecturer. But it's not where my heart is. It's a fun way to spend my brain. It's a fun way to do that, but it really is not. It was such a clear, what a lovely one-off. And that was a beautiful realization, because I think before I would have maybe even felt the pull of my heart of Andrea, this is what you're supposed to be doing. See how good you are at this, Andrea? See how important it is, the information you're sharing? I mean, it is and it isn't. You know what I mean? And I didn't have that. I didn't have that internal battle. I didn't have that confrontation with that side of myself that I've really worked to honor and let go. And so that felt like I grew a little bit today.
Aw, I love that.
Yeah. How was your heart this morning?
There's a book that I may or may not have given to you and your boys, but it was my heart is a mini colored place or something, where it just goes through all these different things. And I feel already this morning I've been through so many waves of heart stuff. So, I mean, I feel, without dragging everyone through 20 stories this morning, I'll just name where my heart is. But it's there's pieces of my life right now that feel so precious and beautiful. There are people in my life right now who are really struggling. And so there's a way that my heart feels pulled in attention towards, is there anything I can offer that relieves any part of their suffering, or just that I'm here, and kind of feeling there's just a lot of people really going through it. And so trying to appreciate I'm not in that moment, and this too shall pass, that we all have our moments that we're in that. Yeah. So just a little tenderhearted mixed with some real joy. I got married this weekend.
Yeah.
I have a husband. Yeah.
You have a husband.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Who I love.
I know. He's a sweet, sweet soul. And just the medicine for all the hard relationships. And so it's both and.
Yes, a both and. Sometimes I think I know we've sort of been having this little conversation, sort of if we lived closer, but I'm shit, would we get fucking anything done, or would we just be I need to come over?
Let's find out. Come move closer.
Let's try it out. Why should
why
we
wouldn't
just,
we try it? We could try it. And change it if it turns out to be problematic.
We could do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wish you could just be I need to come over, and I'd make you some of my yummy, really strong cold coffee. So this morning, I feel our guest is perfectly aligned with sort of your heart coming through 20 stages in one morning. We have Sarah Hanson. Sarah is a contributing editor for the anthology Shaking Off the Ashes, and her poetry has appeared in the Literary Times, the Saranac Review, and Anti-Heroin Chic. She lives in Minneapolis with her husband, Jay, their 3 cats, Darwin, Waffles, and Princess Leia, very well-named cats, and a codependent to-be-read pile. I have one of those.
Emotional support pile.
That's right. Sarah's new book, Conjuring the Hurricane, comes out I think will be released by the time this episode comes out, April 28th. There it
Yay!
is, Conjuring the
Beautiful.
Hurricane. Sarah, welcome to All the Grief.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be with you both.
You're
Mm.
so welcome on this podcast. Sarah, how is your heart this morning?
What a great question. And I am, I think, a little with Rebecca in the multitudes that my heart is experiencing. I have been noticing a lot of excitement around this book launch and getting very close to having it be in the world. And I'm also very aware that excitement and fear run on like the exact same neural pathways. And so I'm like scare-sighted all the time. I'm just like,
Mm.
I am back and forth between like, this is amazing and I'm so proud of you and people are going to need this book. And like, this was a terrible idea. What were you thinking? Like,
Yeah.
you can't tell everyone your entire life story.
Mm.
And so it's both of those kind
Yeah.
of mixed together.
Mm.
Usually excitement is winning, but I would be lying if I said there was not a measure of some anxiety and fear around, did I tell the truth well enough? Will people like it? Will it,
Mhm.
all of which is a little out of my control at this point. So I'm
Yes.
trying to just breathe into that and lean into the excitement, but I'm a little bit of a multitude myself.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Well, welcome. Obviously, we appreciate that and can hold that with you. Rebecca and I, obviously, we get to interview all types of authors and writers, people who write poetry and memoirs and screenplays. And it's just a fascinating little non-paying job that we've created for
Love
ourselves here.
that.
Mhm.
And I was telling Rebecca, I was like, this poetry book, I read it voraciously, and it was like one that you could sit down, and sometimes I want to hear poetry spoken. I grew up in Denver in a spoken word poetry scene, and that was the poetry that really like evoked my soul magic. And yet reading this, it was just every
Mhm.
poem was so powerful, and I just couldn't wait to turn the page.
Mm.
And so I want to offer that to the excited part of your heart and just
Yeah.
say it's beautiful. What a beautiful and brave and courageous offering you've given the world. So thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I received that very tenderly and gratefully. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Well, Sarah, as we start, what is your grief origin story? So the moment when grief sort of flipped your world upside down.
Yeah, I was 10 years old when my stepfather, who was the safe adult in my growing up, in that he was not acting as a parent. You know, I had my mother and I have a great relationship. My father, as you know from the book, was much more difficult, and he just didn't have a lot of tolerance for the world, for me, kind of for anything. And my stepfather, Lon, was the gentle man in the room who was not really trying to parent me. He called me like his pal. I was 2 when he
Mm.
married my mother,
Mhm.
and when I was 10, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. There was a grief along, with that diagnosis. And then he went into remission for quite some time. And when I was a senior in high school, so 6 years later, it came back, and then he passed when I was 18. And that loss was so pivotal, and I think it was 24 years ago. And I've had many other losses that have been very, varying levels of grief and really hitting into my heart. But that one was so pivotal for me and so sort of transformational because he was just such the person that I saw as safe in my life at that
Mhm.
time. And the loss of him, I think, helped or was a domino in some of the choices that I made in my earlier 20s that were a result of the grief and the anger and the unsafety that I felt when I
Mhm.
had sort of lost him as an anchor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and reading and picking up some of those pieces, just really feeling like the unfairness of that
Mm.
loss.
There is no fair
Right.
loss.
No, there isn't.
And this one felt particularly unfair. Such
Yeah.
an out of order event. He was, I think, only 47. My mom was 40. I was 18. It was
Mhm.
just, there were so many elements that just, felt like, what is this? This is the
Yeah.
worst. And it's all the worst, but that one was like a worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We've had another guest kind of talk about, particularly as a child, not having steady parenting from all angles. And so when that anchor, whoever it is, a step parent, a parent, a grandparent dies, how unmooring that is, just how it really shifts your world in a different way, like losing that figure in your life at 18, just as you're moving through a threshold into young adulthood, and having that male figure that was for you an anchor, really safe and loving. And so, yeah, talk to us just a little bit, like out of that grief. And much of your poetry in this book really explores some of that early, it reflects on the life with your dad. And that is some really powerful and shifting language. And I was so grateful for it. Actually, before we start, I wanted to read to everyone, though I know you'll all run out and get this book. You write a note from the author. And so I just wanted to read it, if that's okay. Or do you want to read it? You're the author.
Sure, I would love to.
It's like, can I read your words to you?
There is actually a deep joy that comes from hearing your words said by someone else, because you get to experience it differently. So that's never weird for an author. That's actually
that's good to know.
Yeah. But I'd be happy to read it.
Please.
This was advised to me for legal purposes. And then I decided to keep the legal aspect, but also tell the truth. The author wishes to express that this is a work of fiction, except for all the parts that happened exactly as written. Any resemblance to persons living or dead is either entirely coincidental or completely intentional, as the author is no longer haunted and it is the ghost's turn to be afraid. The reader is advised to examine all attics, basements, and crawl spaces, be they physical or emotional, acknowledged or tacit, for any snares that demand the reader's loyalty, submission, denial, or endurance at the expense of the reader's soul. The reader is encouraged to forsake the rules, whisper a quiet prayer for strength and forgiveness, and then save their life in any cobbled together way they can.
I mean, I read that and I was like,
buckle in. That was so good. Yeah.
It's
well
so
done.
Good. Yes. Well done turning legalese into try to legalize my truth.
I was like, you can't really give a poet legalese and expect them to be like full send. Like, we'll just do what the lawyer said. I was like, I got this.
You do have this. It was so beautiful. One of our favorite guests, who were just like constantly trying to make our inner circle friend, Darnell Lamont Walker, one of his premises of life is like, it's your story and you get to tell it. And people alive or dead, like, they don't deserve editing. What he says was, if they wanted a better story told, they would have acted better. And, and so I just think it's such a beautiful permission to say, like, I spent so much time being afraid and I don't have to be afraid anymore. And that's on you. Ghost or alive or whoever you are, that's on you. So it was just such a beautiful buckle in, but also like unleashing, like, here we go. I'm about to tell you the truth of my life. So Thank you for reading that to us. It was one of the most powerful, it was in fact the most powerful author's note I've ever read.
Thank you. I'm so delighted. Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, take us back a little bit and talk to us about growing up and that relationship with your dad, which was so formative, as all of our relationships are with our parents, so formative in both your life, but also sort of your experience of grief.
Yeah, so my father, I tried to be fair to him and essence of what he was doing or not doing, and not doing particularly well in my, now 43-year-old estimation. But he was a very intolerant man he just had a really hard time managing his reaction to the world. And the way that he chose to deal with that was by asking kind of the entire household to manage that for him. So, instead of him figuring out why he was upset about certain things, it became my stepmom's responsibility, my brother's responsibility to sort of move as quietly as possible. And I was the sort of whisperer of his emotions, probably because I have a genetic understanding of some of the things. So my formative years were really spent tiptoeing through a household that was very angry and trying to translate to my other family members how to sort of be a little softer, move a little quieter. And, my older brother, for better or worse, he just could not, he's a truth teller to his core, and he just could not get on board with telling my dad, what he wanted to hear or what, kind of would smooth over a situation. And so I was like, Chris, you're the problem here, because he would get really sideways with my dad. And, it was obvious to us that my dad was wrong, or it was unjust, or was doing something that was, but I had learned and internalized that the best response was like, let's calm it down, say what we need to say, get out of this. And my older brother just would not. And I have so much retrospective admiration for what it was like for him to be a child, in this and just refusing anything but telling the truth back to someone who was not in any way going to receive it, was not going to hear my brother, was not going to change his mind. And I think it was really brave, and it is part of the sort of bravery that I have now tried to sit in and say, what would I say to my dad if he were alive now? And a lot of that was borrowing the strategy of my older brother. There's a common through line when you hear, about like emotional abuse or generational trauma. It's like, well, he didn't hit us. We always had food. And that is true. I think if we could bring my dad's spirit into the room and ask him, I think he would honestly say he did a better job as a father than his dad was to him. And I think that that's probably factually true. I have no idea what my grandfather would say. I suspect something very similar, so there is an element that I think he did improve upon what he inherited, and yet what he passed on to us was also still really damaging. And peeling apart how I can acknowledge and sort of grieve for him what he received in childhood, and then also just ragefully acknowledge what he gave to us. There's a real tension in that I don't try to resolve super easily. He is or was who he was. His spirit is doing what it's doing. And, he's going to have to work on that whatever he's doing now. It's like that's his to solve.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a beautiful way of talking about that. We've done an episode on estrangement grief and also been in some of our grief retreats and gatherings, talk to folks who are in the grief of estrangement from their parent. I know that you had this boundaried relationship with your father. You weren't necessarily in estrangement, but you had a very boundaried, cautious relationship with him based on your book. And I love that view of being able to hold both of these, because I think sometimes the reaction is they did the best they could. And so therefore, all we should have is grace in our heart. And I recently got to spend some time with folks who are just a couple decades older than me. We are sort of like spanned the generations from 80 to 8. Yeah, that's what we spanned when we were all together, which is a beautiful way to spend time. And I think for me, it was watching people who even later in life who were coming from childhoods and parenting experiences and maybe even having improved on their parenting, but it still wasn't what their kids needed, making the choice in their lifetime here to do better, to figure themselves out, to honor and take responsibility and accountability. And so I just like being able to hold all of those things. Like we can hold rage in our heart for what we were given because it wasn't fair or just. Like even if it was better, it still wasn't what we deserved. And what someone's best is really, I mean, that's a complex thing to analyze and to just put on one, on someone. Like they did their best. So you should just be loving and grateful, or forgiving or whatever it is. So I love that complicated way that you hold all of those complexities. Yeah.
I really appreciated the way you so succinctly and powerfully put that into the poem, Daddy Issues. Would you read that one?
Daddy issues. We tell a grown woman she has daddy issues instead of telling a grown man he is a father-sized disappointment, as though his mistreatment or abandonment of her is her shame instead of his.
Mm. Hmm. Multiple people have read that now because I sent it as a picture to so many friends. I was like, this. But it's so real. And as a therapist, I mean, I never use the term daddy issues, but it's like when we're in session and people are like moving through the hard things that happened when they were children and how and we see the link of like, oh, and this is why you have a hypervigilance right now, or this is whatever. A lot of times for people, that is not relieving. It actually increases shame. And I was just like, oh, I'm going to bring this poem in and hand it to my clients to be like, I see this and I know this. Like this was a father-sized disappointment and
Yeah.
he gets to hold that shame. Like you don't have to be ashamed of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a beautiful offering.
I'm so delighted. It is my intention to try to get this book into places of healing and as a resource for
Mhm.
therapists and also other places where women gather, like salons and where we get our hair done and like acupuncture and my
Mhm.
Reiki, because that is where women so often get to tell their stories and have them be heard and held, in these more healing spaces. And so to have something that can be an offering to say, I think this could help. That is like a dream of mine to get it into healing spaces. So I am thrilled that it's just naturally made its way there already. It makes me
Yeah.
so happy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just sort of like jump to, I assume this is in the final as well, because you said everything's the same. This offering of the prompts and things for a book club at the
Oh, yeah.
end. I thought that was so, as I do offer on occasion, like grief book, I call them just like book journeys, but they're very book club-esque, and we're reading a book together and using it as a way to talk about grief. And I was just looking through the questions. I'm like, I wish I want to send this to every author that I do their book and be like, this, because it's such a great way to get people talking about their own stories through the process of hearing your stories. So I just, yeah, wanted to say
Thank
that was a
you.
really cool offering. And how did you come up with that idea?
So in releasing this book, this was, releasing my story, right? My
Hmm.
shame around my history. And, I'm like, for the people who know me, I'm like, if they were to come up to me and be like, did you leave anything out? I would be like, regrettably, I did not. Like, it's in there. And
Yeah.
so part of this book was to tell my story and put it out. But another part of this book is an acknowledgement that this is not a lone experience and that whether someone has these exact relatable stories in their life, they have, these aspects that have been hard to hold, that have been hard to live in, that have been hard to explain afterwards. And we have so little societal, I don't know, language tolerance, ability to hold imperfect survivors imperfectly and let their imperfections, be a part of the story. That I wanted to just create a space that says you don't have to cut out the parts that make you not feel so great, because those are the parts that are actually what you survived and what you came through. And you don't have to make that tolerable for other people. And you can, in fact, find ways to talk about it in safe places, right? Like, don't
Hmm.
be smart about it, especially if
Hmm.
you're very tender around these stories, but to give a framework for folks that are starting to think about, what if I told the whole truth? What if I really
Hmm.
told it true? What would that feel like?
Hmm.
It's beautiful. It's so interesting because the poem that it conjured for me was "Not everyone is made for honesty." But in it, you're telling this truth. And so it's like, not everyone is made for honesty. Sometimes we use a lie to tell it. What you say is, here you go. Not
Please.
everyone is made for honesty. And sometimes the lie makes more sense than the truth. And I think as we're navigating trauma, survivor, whatever people have, we've all survived something, though some of us have survived violence within these very personal, intimate relationships, the things we have to do either to survive externally, like I can't also deal with your shame about what I'm going through. Like I've got enough of it on my own, or what we have to tell ourselves. I just thought it was such a beautiful, like, hey, this happens. Hey, this happens. This is another survival strategy. So you're so truthful, even if sometimes you had to tell a lie.
Yeah.
And I think about what it costs to tell the truth, and there are some situations and some people where that cost is too high.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to offer folks is one way to say, what you have in your emotional bank account to pay. And there are times when it costs too much, and that is okay as well. There's a classic, one of my favorite books, Tim O'Brien, The Things They Carried. For anyone who's not familiar with it, it's his story about the Vietnam War. And he's telling a series of stories, and you get, I don't know, midway through the book, and he starts telling you that story never happened, that story never happened. But it is more true. That story that I just told you is more honest than the story I could tell you that actually happened to me. And he calls it the difference between like the story truth and the happening truth. And I mean, I read that when I was like 16 years old, and I was like, game over. Like, the way to tell the truth now has been amplified and opened up in a way that allows, even if you can't pay the high cost of telling the happening truth, you can still tell the story truth and be honest.
Wow.
The storytelling truth. I probably, like your brother, though in different situations, not like your brother with like my parent, but maybe because of that. And hearing all the time that like truth is the best policy, or whatever that saying is. I'm also terrible at like catchphrases, but I would just tell people the truth. And I remember my sister sitting me down was like, girl, like, not everybody likes to hear that. And here are ways to do that don't maybe feel like as callous or as harsh or as, condemning as sometimes the truth can be, which was never my intention. But I was just like, well, here's the truth. And so I just need to explore that more in my heart, because I think that's been really hard for me to navigate of like, wait, but we're supposed to tell the truth. And people say they want to hear the truth. And like, how can I make decisions if I don't know the truth? And then when you tell them the truth, they're like, oh my God, you're so mean. And I'm like, I'm so confused. People are weird. So maybe I just need to work on my storytelling truth.
That's beautiful. So yeah, Sarah, there's like the linear story, and then there's the way that, and it's the first time I've ever heard it described as that. It's not that I haven't read braided narratives before, but it was like this idea of like this braided narrative following the linear path as moving through your assumed timeline in your life. Your first husband that was a really abusive relationship. You were in your early 20s. And yeah, I feel like so much of that illuminated that space. I can't tell the truth. It's not safe to tell the truth. The queso dip story. I have to go in and be okay. This is the social face, and this is what we're presenting to the world. But as a lot of that kind of like in hindsight, I'm telling the story, I can tell you what I feel, or like what parts of you were really holding on to like, something is really fucking wrong here and I don't know what to do with that. Or like the wisdom part of you that kind of knew, I don't like doing this.
Yeah, it's a great question. And just for my own sense of like integrity, I do want to say the man that I write about in this book, we were not married.
Okay.
I was married in my very early 20s. I don't include him. There's one line that references him very briefly because I just wish him all the best and is not a part of this. So I just wanted to clarify that in case someone is like, wait a second.
Yeah.
So when I was living with my abusive ex, in my like mid to late 20s, I had an underlying sense for quite some time, that something was not quite right. The challenge that I faced was growing up, I had to, two things. I learned really early that I could manage really difficult emotions, and that living in a home with anger felt like, well, this is just what a home is. So things that a healthy person might have experienced that and just noped right on out of that. I was like, ooh, I know how to do this. I know how to navigate in this. I can probably fix this. And I was really good at it until I wasn't.
Hmm.
And then the other challenge that I was carrying from my childhood was that I had turned off or turned down all of my danger sensors because, right, like, and that's part of like with complex PTSD, my brain just gave up trying to register every single danger and warning sign as a child because would have been constant.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my connection to my inner knowing was very muted. And so it's
Mm.
not that I didn't know that there was a problem. And you can see the through line that I was aware, but I was committed to, and this is also partially because I had been married to a very kind man and gotten divorced, and I was really committed to not being a person who fails a relationship again. And I
Mm.
was not willing to see that this relationship was failing me
Mhm.
because I was just like, well, I've already failed once. I refuse to do it again, and that's like the A student and the honor roll and the like, I can,
Mhm.
and I just thought I could strap this whole thing to my back and move both of us, into safety and emotional connection and warmth, which was never, ever his plan. He didn't want any of those things.
Mhm.
And so the more I tried to bring us into emotional awareness and connection and reflect back to him how his, actions were harming me or making me feel, the worse things got because he did not want in any way to acknowledge that he was doing something that was harmful. He just wanted his agenda to be executed and for me to go along with it. And the more I
Mm.
tried to do what I thought was like, well, let's break this down. Let me talk to you about why that hurts my feelings or like what's under this. It got so much worse. And so, there was a slow awakening. What's the phrase? Like, it happens like very slowly and then all at once.
Mhm.
That is what the realization that I needed to leave felt like. And I remember talking to one of my friends kind of towards the end, and I was like, well, if I ever end up on an episode of Dateline, and she was like, what? And I was like, well, I'm not saying that that's like likely, but there's like a 5%, chance. And she's like, it should be 0. And I was like,
Huh.
you know what? You're right. Like,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
that was a real eye opener of like, it should be 0.
Yeah. What you just said, it just like rewrote some cells of my own experience. I was in a relationship that was emotionally abusive. And again, one of those things where you're like, oh, I mean, it wasn't physical. You kind of like, it wasn't that bad, but it was awful. It was awful to live in it. And so I just feel like how you described that experience feels like it's such good information. There's something about it that feels like salve to a wound kind of a thing where it's like, what are the realizations we need to be having in a thing when we find ourselves working so hard to make a thing work? I remember after the relationship ended and I was explaining to my therapist, I said, but I just believe that everything is figure outable and like that we really could have worked on this. And she was like, it feels like it's time to let go of that belief. Like some things are unworkable. And what you said that was like that for me just now was like, that was never his agenda. It wasn't the thing that I was thinking like, oh, we'll figure out how to dance together. And it was like, no, the dance is going to keep changing and I'm going to keep you dancing. I'm going to keep you on your feet. And it was just, I could not maneuver my way into safety. And the important thing was like, if you don't feel safe, you don't feel safe. Like that's your red flag. And there was a line that felt like it encapsulated that so beautifully. In trying to love him back to tenderness, I swung for the fences, but he was swinging too. In the poem PTSD, I got teary-eyed. I was like, that's it. Like you're trying so hard, but that they're trying something different.
Yeah, I mean that I remember I teared up while I was writing that particular poem, and that line, was unedited. It didn't go through any transformation from when I initially wrote it, and it was so revelatory and so much grief around the realization that this was never ever going to be resolvable in my effort. There was never going to be a thing. And, when you're very highly capable and you're very figure outable and there
Yeah.
grief around this was never, ever going to be mine to fix. There was
Mhm.
nothing I could do. Felt horrible and then felt amazing,
Mhm.
because all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, there was first it was like, "Oh my god, there was no sweetheart, there was never ever gonna be anything." And then all of a sudden, it was like, "Oh, honey, there was never gonna be anything. This is
Mhm.
good news. Like, you didn't fail. Oh, this was never gonna be yours."
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was beautiful. Revelatory is such a good word. It's like that. It's a revelatory line. It's yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And, I started my career kind of by happenstance working with people impacted by domestic violence. So, early in my 20s, being sort of like understanding both the experiences, the breadth of experience of people who are impacted by domestic violence, and then the public perception of what is domestic violence and what isn't. I spent well over a decade in that space. And so I think what's so beautiful is I can feel the pain, I can feel the fear, I can feel the constriction in your poems, the queso dip one. I mean, there's so many others, but that one, especially as you're just coming into your book, I can feel that moment. I can feel the restriction, the like, what do I do now? I have to put on this face. What's beautiful is I hope as people who maybe haven't experienced that can read and feel what you were feeling and come to an understanding of what you just said, Rebecca, which is like if you feel unsafe, like that is not a healthy relationship. And it doesn't always take a broken bone to indicate that that's too much. There's so much in between those things, in between a healthy relationship and something that you allude to here, which is murder.
Mhm.
We know that homicide, where a partner kills their partner, is a reason why women die throughout the world. And so, it can range anywhere in there, and that we just need to be observant of all of that. And hopefully, somebody reading either can say, I understand myself in this, or I understand more about this.
Yeah, my hope really was to give a voice to people who have experienced this, but to also give a entry for people, who stand on the sidelines and say, "Well, why doesn't she just leave?"
Mhm.
And to really make it clear, there are a lot of reasons, and they're complicated reasons, and the danger in leaving is very real. That is, I think it's like 75% of all partner homicides occur after a separation
Mhm.
attempt.
Mhm.
And then you add, if you share pets, if you share a home, you share children, you share finances, there are a lot of reasons that women carry as to
Mhm.
why they don't leave. And I mean, like, I never want to hear that question again in my
Yes.
life, but I wanted to provide an answer as well, to be like, well,
Mhm.
take a look, like, see what would you do? Like, what would you do
Mhm.
if this were you in this set of circumstances, and to try to humanize the way that all of us, I believe, are capable of so many types of reactions that we believe,
Mhm.
appear in our, "Oh, I would
Yeah.
never."
Mhm.
And it's like, well, you wouldn't perhaps in your current set of circumstances, in your current where you live on earth, or your current financial or, whatever. Yeah, that is maybe very true for you. But should you find yourself in this
Mhm.
set of circumstances or that set of circumstances, you might.
Yeah.
You might surprise yourself, and that was really important to me because I encountered so much, "Oh, I would never."
Mm.
Like,
Mm.
"Are you sure?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you open that doorway of compassion. I think for so many of the experiences that you've named in your writing, and why I feel so grateful that you told so much truth, so much story truth, so much poetry truth, because it's like examining those places that you have judgment and being like, "Wait, can I know that?" And I think that was one of the things that kind of felt shocking to me post-relationship, because I didn't even unravel within the relationship how much constriction I was in. And then post-relationship, I was like, I actually didn't carry an identity as a person who would stay in an abusive relationship. My brain just kept rewriting how that's not what was happening. These were my issues. I had a story that I wouldn't do that. it's so different when you're in it. Yeah, exactly what you're saying.
And that idea of I had a story that I wouldn't do that is so profound, because I think so much of my life, I wasn't going to get divorced
Mhm.
at 22. I wasn't going to be in an abusive relationship. I wasn't going to have an affair as a way to exit that relationship. I was never going to have an abortion. I was never going to leave my hometown and disappoint my whomever. And oh my gosh, here I am looking back at all and then being like, well, that was a good story I told myself about myself. And now I need to rewrite to incorporate the truth of what actually
Yeah.
happened and to allow for those things to be true and to not destroy my sense of self,
Mm.
right? Like how to look in the mirror every day, knowing that you have acted in ways that a younger version of you or a different version of you would never. And then, but here you are. And so, how do you tell yourself a new story that allows for more experience of what actually happened and allows for that to exist in ways that you can move with instead of fighting against,
Mhm.
right? Because, like you were mentioning, oh, if I have the story of I would never be in an abusive relationship, and then suddenly you are, it's like if you are not moving with that new story, you're fighting against
Mhm.
it, and that, kept you
Mhm.
stuck. And so many of us, fight against these ideas of the real truth of the messy, imperfect truth of ourselves. And that keeps us, I think, stuck and small and less able to expand into a broader, more generous, more flexible version of ourselves, which then when you can do that about your own story, it becomes easier to experience that in other people and to also grant that to other people,
Mhm.
which was part of the permission that I wanted to sort of weave into this is we're all doing the best we can.
Mm.
Even when it goes so sideways, or most of us are doing the best we can. People listening to this podcast are doing the best they can.
Exactly.
And the subtitle of the book is The Best Way to Save Your Life is Any Way You Can.
Mhm.
And I mean it so wholeheartedly of
Mhm.
if it goes sideways, it goes sideways. Any way you can, good job.
Mhm.
I love that, and that was exactly where I was gonna go with Rebecca's reflection and just adding on to yours was in your vulnerability and you're just like, "I'm just gonna put it all down. I'm gonna put it all out there," even if it evokes that fear side of yourself, is it allowed us to see our own judgment in
Mhm.
whichever one it was for us, and it was making me think I have a friend who was like, "Oh, I don't like reading memoirs." And I think before we started this podcast, I did not read memoirs either, which is interesting because I'm like a social scientist and I do actually love people's stories, but I've had little interest. And then I was like, God, we haven't read a bad one. Like, in all honesty, maybe some people could have paid a little bit more for an editor, but but the stories were still really good.
Mhm.
And I realized the difference is like a famous person's memoir is about maintaining a legacy of an abstraction of who they were. And
Mhm.
not that they're inhuman, but like
Regular folk.
regular folk who are writing a memoir in whatever way, in prose or narrative, however they're doing it, are doing it as a way to express their full humanity, to come into contact with their own deep truths. And I'm like, God, they are so honest and so profound, and they help me see myself. And so I want to echo that. And I knew mine. I didn't know mine until I came to like one of your first poems, and then it's throughout was, oh, people who cheat on their partners. That is one of mine where I have a lot
Mhm.
of judgment. And this just moving with you through this. And there was one where it was something about like, at what point do mistresses get to be the wife? I think that's in the title of the poem. And really evoking this imagery of the Scarlet Woman and women burned at the stake and just the ways that women have been demonized. And it was so helpful to me to move through this book and be able to see my own judgment around that and feel your humanity and feel my humanity and be like, girl,
Mhm.
fucking let it go.
Right. Well, I want to hear from you on that experience because it was a similar sort of my first marriage. ended because he had an affair. And it was one of those things where I could see it happening. And I kept telling myself, you're paranoid and don't even bring it up because you're going to seem like you're crazy and you're paranoid. And I'm like, I'm just reading their vibe. I was so angry at her. And that's what really fascinated me. And I think whenever I was reading, to the point that, they're not together. He's in a relationship now. He and I are friends. Like that, it's water under the bridge. And I kind of am like secretly like, and thank you. But to her, right? I'm also like, that relationship didn't serve me. Now I get to be in this one that I love. It's like I'll think sometimes about writing her a letter all these years later and just being like, that really hurt, but it's like I could tell him all of my feelings, but it was sort of like, here's this other person who just kind of like in my world. But as I was reading it, I was like, oh, right, Rebecca, remember that time you had an affair with a married man? Like, that just completely escaped. I was like young. I was in my, early 20s and he was young too. So much of what you were writing, I was like, oh, this idea of the woman carrying that, like we have a word mistress. We don't have a word for a man.
Yeah, maybe
like,
it's Mr. and he's just always, no, I'm just kidding.
all the time. Right. Or like that Scarlet A and like all the things that we carry. And I wonder how this is for you too, because you even say like, then they're like, once a cheater, always a cheater. It comes up against this feeling of like, can I bring sort of a bigger story and a bigger grace to people and kind of release some of that judgment while still holding tightly to, and not this guy, please. Like, so yeah, like how did you work that in your own being? Because I think it's a story we all carry and that women carry.
I will say that was the hardest part to write about. And it was the hardest part that I'm still the most protective over, is my relationship with my now husband. We're moving into like 13 years together. He is I'm like in every lifetime, we're going to find each other. But I still feel so protective over how that love gets seen and understood. There's a big part of me that did not want to let people see that, and so, I will say I am not like pro go cheat on your spouse. That's like, my friends come to me and, it's like, oh, so-and-so's cheating. And I'm like, get rid of him, dump him. He sucks. I'll hate him forever.
Yes,
so I'm also, have that exact same reaction. And I have to, so that's not weird for the reader. And I put that first poem that mentions, it's the first time you meet my husband in the book. It's the first time you understand who he is as a character. And I put that as the third poem so intentionally because I didn't want to trick the reader into, thinking some lovely things about me as, as a person through this book and then drop that on them halfway through. That felt really mean. I didn't want to do that to the reader. So I wanted to give people the exit ramp early on. If it's like, hey, if this is really going to be hard for you and you just can't, you can quit now. Like, and I get it. This may not be a story that some folks can carry based on where they are in their relationship to what that would feel like to them or how closely they align with having been cheated on. So that was very intentional. And I get it for any of your listeners who are like, no, thank you. Totally get it. But it was also meant to be an invitation. And I'm really glad you both stuck through it to say, hey, if you can read to the end of this poem, can you read to the end of the next one? Could you, and can we pull at this very, very slightly? And, the process of reconciling, particularly that phrase, once a cheater, always a cheater. I had that written out on a piece of paper and I had it on my altar for 3 years because I had my therapist at the time was like, you have to decide if you think this is true or not. Because I was like, this is my biggest fear about myself. Like, what do I do? How do I? And she's like, I can't answer that for you. Like, only you can answer that. And she's like, it's going to take you as long as it takes you to decide what you think about that. And so it took several years for me to kind of think through like who I was as a person then, the choices and options that I felt I had available to me 13 years ago, the ability to say to someone, I'm leaving you goodbye very cleanly, the inner tools that I had versus who I am now, 13 years later, and, a billion therapy sessions. And, having a relationship now that is safe to tell the truth to that, if the absolute unthinkable were to happen and I were to be like, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore, it would be very safe to just say that and leave, right? Which was not an option that I had or believed I had at the time. And so I very slowly came to the realization that the person that I am now and have grown into would not make those choices. And I'm like, yeah, I'm with you. Like, I'm like, what was she doing?
Yeah.
I hate it. And also I wanted to provide, it was very important to me. I've had readers say, I never talk about this, but my marriage started in an affair and I've never heard that love story told.
Yes.
And I was like, I haven't either.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find a way to let someone experience that whole rate and like, girl, no, oh my God, I think I hate her on page 3.
Yeah.
Like, oh, her husband is the darlingest love of her life. And oh my goodness, I am glad that they figured it out.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there are other versions or other lifetimes where we maybe chose to stay in those relationships that weren't working and made it to 60 or 65 or the kids have left and then all of a sudden we're like, oh, and I was like, I think this is just the universe according to me, but
Yeah.
like, is this the time that we were like, we're not going to wait that long. We're going to, and this is uncomfortable. This sucks. Like why did we get ourselves into
Yeah.
this? But to say, okay, we're not going to waste a life not being together just because everyone else will be mad about it. And there are people, I'm like, you would be right to be mad about this till the day you die
Yeah.
if you want to. I hope you don't carry that much anger. That's a lot of
Yeah.
anger, but like, want to, I'd be like, you know what? Fair enough.
Right.
Like,
For
And
sure.
I think I just, want to share. I certainly did not hate you in that poem,
No.
even
No.
even though I realized, like, oh shit, I have judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, even though I just to
Yeah.
help me remember, like, oh girl, you still have judgment around this. And I have friends who are in very loving relationships that started an affair. So, it's interesting how I can hold both of those spaces. How you said, like, I can be this and tell my friend, fucking leave him. But what I found really tender as I read through the book, and even as you were talking about this just to open, was you needing to say, like, we're 10 winters on, we're this far in, like having to prove that this was worthy, having to prove that this was the long game, having to prove that this love was true. And that broke my heart. Like, it was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that my judgment makes you feel like you have to prove to me that your love is real. That was part of the reflection throughout the book. So I just want to offer anybody who's at page 3 and is like, I don't know, there's a growth point for you in it. Yeah, stick with it. It is easy to read to the bottom of the poem and start at the next one. So I just wanted to offer that.
One of the things when I finally burned that once always a cheater piece of paper and offered it back, what I was struck by is there is nothing else that we do that we say once a blank, always that. Nothing. There's no other action that we assign that level of permanence to. And I get it as a way of warning someone, hey, clock someone's repeated behaviors, what people repeatedly do, they're likely to do again. But that like once a blank is we only apply it to this. And once I saw that and was like, I don't agree with this statement in any other aspect of my life, why would I let it bind me in my identity? And then that was just like took the lighter to it and like sent it off into the ether. I was like, no more of that.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love that. We get to be as many things in our life as we want to be. Not one
right.
choice defines us.
Absolutely. And I think the importance of writing, there's like a shame reduction that comes from telling our truth too. Like when we're holding the pieces, like we've talked about in these different arenas where it's like, oh, I don't want to tell the truth, or I'm like, I need to hide this thing. And it starts to take its toll on us. Like it's the person who's paying for that is me. And then when I can just say, oh, let me tell you this story, because when you own it, now it doesn't have power over you. My grandfather on my dad's side, his second wife, it was an affair and they had a child. She was pregnant while she was married to the other husband. And she was like, no, that's his kid. And he looks exactly like my dad, and it was like, God, I mean, that she had to carry the burden of, I don't want to admit this. And we just fell in love later. And that he became the stepdad to my child. But it's like, no, that was his kid. And then how is that for that child? And what shame is he living with? And just the ways that those stories continue. And I just felt like, I don't know, it's like there's a part of me that also can be very zoomed out and spiritual. And even when, this was happening to me in my relationship, that I could say, oh, I realized that I thought that I had ownership of this person, and I actually don't. And they do have free will. They're sovereign being. And if this doesn't feel true to them anymore, and that feels true to them, it's not about me. Like, it's not mine to cling to, and it's not mine to say they did something to me. Like, it just is like, this was happening for them, and this is what felt true now. And I could also understand it, sort of simultaneous to being like, fuck you, just like that both could happen. So I just felt that like I would want to offer that shame reduction for people as well.
Yeah. And I think, the idea that we get to change and change and change again and again and again, that in some ways feels really like, no, I want it to be this forever, I want my home, my house, whatever the thing is, it's like we want the certainty that it's not going to change. And the reality is that everything is changing, sometimes because of our will and sometimes completely against our will. And the ability to allow things to change is one of the ways that I have found the ability to reduce my own suffering. And it's taken me a long time to allow things that feel unjust, unfair. I hate it. Oh my God. I wouldn't choose this in a million years. And to be like, well, that is what seems to be on offer from the universe right now. I don't seem to be getting anything else like as a substitute for this. So, okay. And that has helped me at least meet it with slightly less hatefulness. Like, I'm not going to say I'm like, the mystic on the mountain who's like, I receive all things as a lesson.
No.
Okay. But to say like, well, all right, see what we got in here that is maybe I can put to use.
Exactly. I love that. Well, we're at time today, so I know. Beautiful though. Such a sweet conversation. And yeah, I'm going to close as we do with a question that's always a surprise to everyone but me. So I'm pulling from our Planet Grief deck from Arena Green and Brianna Rose, sisters that we've had on this podcast, and who created this beautiful deck with some conversation cards about grief. And so the one that I have for us today, where do you find the most respite in the world? I'll start with you, Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, mine came very quickly. Mine is in nature. I am so lucky. I just spent 4 days in the Pecos Valley with friends at their cabin in the middle of the Santa Fe National Forest in front of a creek. And I would leave voice notes like for you or for, one of my other best friends. And both of you were like, you sound so relaxed. Like I can hear the peace in your voice. And it's the same when I'm at my cabin in the land, like being surrounded by nature, dark, dark, dark skies, going to bed with the sun, rising slowly with the sunrise. Like that is the space I feel most spacious. I feel most calm. I feel most connected. I feel most loved. I feel most in love. And so mine is nature. And you can put me on a beach. I just live in Colorado. You can put me on a beach. Take me anywhere, but take me far, far away from people.
People are not
except my people. Like watching my little boys play in the forest is like I don't even know what else to say. It just like brings me such immense joy to see like, it was like they would go out before breakfast, come in for breakfast, go out before lunch, come back at dinner, go out until it was past dark. And I'm like whistling into the woods for them to come home. I think all of that is that's my space.
Thank you. How about you, Sarah? Where do you find the most respite?
Yeah, I would say nature, but anyone who knows me is going to laugh because I am such an indoor cat. I am not an outside cat, but I love being near nature. But my actual full seen-ness and stillness is particularly with birds, which I think you see a little bit throughout the book. But the way that birds move and respond to me, respond to each other, like the bird song. I started teaching myself all the bird songs because I really wanted to know what my birds were, which ones were busy, and that affinity, of like we are all just these little, fearful things. We are all just little feathered specks in the wind. Has just been like, okay, it's not so serious. Like, okay, we're just going to go on a little flight and we're going to land softly. And that reminder every time I see a bird and they respond to me, I've had them land on me as an affirmation of like, that's right. Like go a little softer, maybe take a little flight.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Also, just an aside, I used to do research on people's connection to the natural world, and it was really, mostly it was around helping people who are nature conservists and climate action folks, like realize that everybody can have a connection with nature, even if they're not like, I want to be in the backcountry. So I used to say, like, you can connect with nature sitting on a porch in your leopard print stilettos. Like, wherever you find that connection, it's just as real as, someone in solitude.
Justice for us porch and indoor cats.
Justice for the indoor cats, yes.
That's right.
I love that.
Rebecca, how about you? Where do you find respite?
I mean, it's nature adjacent, but I actually realized as you were talking, and I do love nature, but what I know to be true about where I find respite in the hardest times is it's in water, taking a bath. There is something like so soothing to my nervous system. And literally, when I was going through my divorce, I was like, oh, I think I'm like single-handedly destroying Boulder's water supply because I would take 4 baths a day, but I would get so worked up. And then it's like, as soon as I could get into the water, it just like soothes me. There was this way I could like visualize and release, like as the water would drain, I would just stay in the tub. And I was like, it's like pulling all of this pain. It's like washed over me. And then, an hour later, I'd be like, nope, I need another bath. But water, and it's true beyond. I mean, I think the bath is like the most accessible thing. I could not live in a place that only had a shower. I couldn't.
Air, water, earth. Look at us 3. Oh, that's beautiful, Rebecca. I know that is a space that you turn to, and it's so beautiful to hear you talk about it. So thank you both. Sarah, we left stuff on the table, and just for anyone, this book is, I don't know, it's storytelling through poetry in a really beautiful way. And there are stories of friendship, of a deep friendship and loss that I know we didn't get to. And I just want to honor that. And I just want to thank you. Thank you for being so courageous to put the whole truth of your life out there for us to be able to connect with your humanity and connect with our own imperfections and our own true stories. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and for, having such a curated space where it is safe to talk about things. I think that's so important for survivors and people who are moving through the big feelings associated with grief and anger and rage and coming to safety. So having a really safe container to do that is just like, that's sacred work.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you to you both, and love to our listeners.
Thank you for listening to this episode of All the Grief. You can find us on Instagram at allthegriefpod. And please take a moment to rate our podcast and share us with your friends. We'd love to keep expanding our reach to all the people who could benefit from conversations on grief. Take care.